Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have more people signed up that might be trickling in, but we want to make sure Beth and Ken can get back home to the Lake Geneva area before they, fall asleep at the wheel. My name is Courtney Cox-Polson. I'm the conservation supervisor here at Loch Lorane, and we are partners with the Ozaukee Washington Birding Coalition. We're very happy to be hosting the Bald Eagle Nest Watch program this evening, and to have Beth and Ken here to talk about what they do and hopefully encourage the people in the room here to become a volunteer and help support the program. So thank you again for coming out this evening, and should we just hold any questions for the end of the...
Yeah, we're going to hold questions to the very end. I'm going to do 2 presentations, but if we can wait until the very end, I'll get to your questions. I can get to Lake Geneva later. Yeah. I have a husband to take me home, so.
Well, thank you both very much.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming out. I thought after the weather yesterday, I might be standing here talking to myself or just to Courtney. So it's good to see so many faces here. So I am a volunteer, a citizen science person. I do not have a background in birds or the natural sciences or anything like that, but boy, it's amazing what you can learn as a citizen science. So hopefully if some of you people want to join with us, you too will be learning a lot. And Ken and I are going to share with you, first of all, I am not Brenna, but this is the head of the program. This is her presentation that she does. I'm going to stay very clinical for Madison Audubon, and then I'm going to start a slide presentation of the experiences Ken and I have had since we've been doing this. And then if I anthropomorphize or something, it's on my slideshow and not Madison Audubon. And then one thing about Madison Audubon is I'm going to call them that. They did change their name to move away from Audubon. They went with Badgerland Bird Alliance, and they almost immediately got threatened with a lawsuit by another group that calls themselves Badgerland Birding. Very different type of organization, so now they're back trying to come up with another name. They do not want to go with Madison because where are we right now? We're not in Madison. So they want to be more inclusive of the state, which is why they were going with Badgerland. I think it should be Badger Country Birding, but that's my 2 cents. So Brenna is the Director of Communications and Outreach. She is one of the co-organizers of the Bald Eagle Nest Watch program. How many of you have heard about it before? Okay. So not too many of you. So what happened is there's a person whose picture we're going to come up on in a moment, and he was a volunteer in New York, and then he moved to Colorado, and he was a volunteer there, and in both of these states they ran this program. So when he moved to Madison, then he went to the Madison Audubon and said, would you like to start this program as well? So it is, he is still a volunteer. He is not a paid member of Madison Audubon, and his name is Drew Cashman. So Drew and Brenna run the program, and as it's expanded, there are others of us who have come on board to help them because they're in Madison. So the nests that Ken and I organize and watch are Walworth, Kenosha, Racine, and then we found the first Milwaukee nests, which we didn't realize what we were getting into when we did that, so it was a big deal. We just thought it was fun to be the ones that found it, so it all took off from there. So I'm going to read this part, and this is the only part I'm going to read because I want to get Madison Audubon right. So the mission of Badgerland Bird Alliance is to protect birds, and that is done 3 primary ways. First is through habitat restoration. They own over 2,500 acres of land, and they've restored or are actively restoring to native habitats to benefit birds and other wildlife, and the people who enjoy them. We are nationally accredited land trust, and the land we own is protected forever. Second is through education. Our education department visits schools, community centers, and neighborhood centers that have at least 50% of their students on free or reduced lunch, or at least 50% students of color. This helps us expand the joys and wonders of nature to communities that have been historically excluded from conservation. Third is through advocacy, citizen science, and community outreach. We engage with our members to stand up for issues that matter to them and birds, to contact other legislators, to study issues that affect birds, and do something about it. Bald Eagle Nest Watch is one of those programs. So, that is Badgerland Alliance or Madison Audubon, depending on what you want to go with. So that little map that just popped up shows you where this program started. So it started in Madison, and it was contained within that region. So bald eagles in Wisconsin, so there used to be 100,000 mature nesting eagles throughout the range. DDT, illegal shooting, and habitat loss is why they disappeared. So they were, DDT was banned in 1972, which has certainly been a big thing for their comeback. And do you know why? What DDT was doing to the bald eagles? Softening the shells. So when they would sit on the eggs, or bald eagles have to rotate their eggs, they have to roll them every couple hours to make sure that they're heated, and they were puncturing them, or when they'd sit down on them, they were crushing them. So this is a survey done in 1974. Oh, is it up there? Okay. And so the red dots are where the nests are at. So they were removed from state in 1997 and federal in 2007 lists for protection, but they remain on the Bald Eagle and Golden Eagle Protection Act. So the last WDNR, which is Wisconsin Department of Natural Resource survey, was 2019. And there were 1,684 nests statewide. So that's a big comeback from DDT. So this young man here in the blue jacket, that is Drew Cashman. So he was the idea man in 2018. He started the program. And I will say he and Brenna are two of the nicest people you'll ever want to meet, should you get the chance to meet them. So why observe a bald eagle's nest? It's a beloved species. It's a great hook for the introduction of conservationism. As the bald eagle population recovers, it still needs protection. Then this is the sad part. WDNR went from 2 flyovers per season to 1 to now none. So DNR stepped back last year, and I'm all the sadder for it. So unforeseen benefits from watching the nests are things like HPAI, which was the avian flu that moved through here in 2022, and we'll get to that later. So in 2018, this just shows you how their growth started. So they had 15 nests when they first started, 9 were successful. They had 15 fledges from those 9 nests, and there were 41 volunteers. And then exponentially, it has grown ever since, and that pretty little blue bald eagle, that's us. And our logo, it's kind of a fake logo, because we are just a group of people who happen to be watching bald eagle nests, and Brenna dubbed us the socialites. So now we are the socialite club of bald eagles. But you can see how the expansion in the state is going. And then we added a few more people to our group. And, and now we have this many counties that are being organized through Madison Audubon or those affiliate members, those partners that they have. So the roles of the volunteers are to observe nests. So that's what these people are doing. They have scopes or they have cameras. The misleading thing about this one with the grassy green is that, you know, you're pretty much over by July 1st, so there's not a lot of those green moments. There's a lot more of those barren, snowy moments where you're out there watching a nest. And then this is the form that you fill out, which is very simple. It's online. It's no longer done in paper. It's very conveniently done online. So the roles of volunteers is when you see a nest that's being encroached, you tell your people heading your area, they'll go to the DNR and say, we need a sign put up. People are getting way too close to the nests. Anyone know how close you can get to a bald eagle nest? 300 feet is the closest you can be. So we all keep our distance. This is not where you're going to be live up close and personal with a bald eagle. You are going to be a distance away because we do not want to interfere in what they're doing. And then you see that poor little guy under the blanket. So something happened in a nest where an eaglet needed to be rescued. So eagles through the nesting season. This is, they meet. They get to know each other a little better. That part doesn't take very long. And then someone is sunk way down low in the nest. And usually all you can see is a head above the nest. If you're just barely seeing the eagle above the nest, that is a good indication it's on eggs. When it starts sitting up higher, or in this case, it is feeding young. I hope you can see that. There's a little fuzzy head there that mom or dad is turning and feeding. So now they have chicks. You can see the one below this one. And so they start out that really pale little light gray, white fuzzy, gray fuzzy. And then their fuzz starts to turn a little bit darker gray. And then they start getting considerably larger. And eventually at some point you're thinking they cannot stay in that nest any longer. But yet they do. So this is a young eaglet that is getting ready to fledge. So he has been hatched for about 3 months. It takes 3 months for an eaglet to go from hatching to probably larger than their parents because they haven't had any work to do. They've been just gaining fat. And so they start to flap around their nest quite a bit using their wings. And then they fledge. And fledge means leaving the nest. So it's their first time that they use their wings to leave their nest. Sometimes it's really awkward. Sometimes it's a beautiful thing. So the highlight reel, this is a throuple. So there are 3 bald eagles that were raising nests of young. And that seems to be happening more often lately. So we have signage now to help people to see that you need to stay away from this area to protect the bald eagles. This was a photograph that Ken and I took of a bald eagle in Ozaukee County, and that is certainly not a nest. That is the beginning of a nest. And then this was out in Sauk City, and Ken and I are in there again. Because we had eaglets in a tree that the parents had abandoned them. Brenna and Drew couldn't be there, so Ken and I went to go help because we had provided an arborist. So, and then there was 2022. So of all those great things that happened with the nests, we lost 65% of our nests in 2022. And I think Ken and I we were watching 7 nests at that time, which was way too many, but I think we only had 1 survive. So it was hard to watch the change in behavior and the death occurring. So this is, many of you may have seen this on the news. It got quite a bit of play. There was a female bald eagle down in Milwaukee that ended up with avian flu and was brought into the Humane Society, and she later had to be euthanized. Once you are getting the neurological effects of HPAI, there is no rebound from that. So they sort of contort their necks turn, and they sort of cut off their own breathing supply, and once she was struggling to breathe, she was humanely euthanized. And yet, we all got together and we celebrated what eagles we did have fledge. So then in 2023, these were nests that Ken and I watched. Milwaukee County, again, they laid eggs. We lost all of Milwaukee County to HPAI, the ones that were raising chicks. They were lost to them, and then we had Paul Smith wrote an article about how we had our first fledge, and that is our first fledger there. We had, boy, that one eagle worked and worked and worked, flapped, 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 and the other one, I swear, was Velcroed into the bottom of that nest. We just couldn't see the Velcro. Took 2 weeks longer for that one to decide it wanted to take off. So, Madison Audubon, the training is late January to early February. This year it is January 20th. Monitoring starts early to mid-February. If you're further north, it starts later. If you're further south, it starts a little sooner. And it goes through June-ish. You know, there's no reason why you can't watch through July. We go back and visit our nests and make sure that everyone's still doing well. They don't fly off right away. They do stick around. So I am not going to take questions at this time. Ken, where's my other one? This is why you have your husband come. All right. That was not an eagle at our house, so. So these, just so you know, this is our perspective of what we've learned. So I can be a little looser about it. All the photos were taken by Ken or myself unless we specified someone else doing it. So how we got involved was we read an article in 2016 that said there were no bald eagles in the 4 counties in the southeastern part of the state. And I was personally offended that eagles did not find Walworth County appealing. So we went out to see if we could find some. And we started finding them. And then I was calling the WDNR and I was asking all sorts of questions, like when a nest failed, why did it fail? Did we talk to the homeowner? Did the homeowner see why it failed? You know, is there anything going around that we should know about? And she was like, oh my gosh, I have to get rid of her. So at some point she asked us if we had heard of the Bald Eagle Nest Watch program and could we take a class with them? We could continue to report to her. There were 6 of us that were friends that started monitoring the nests. But she wanted us to all speak the same language coming back to her so that we all had the same definition of what was going on in the nest. So we took the class and Drew and Brenna had everything electronically organized and we were writing on paper. And so it's like, well, why would we stay independent? It just makes sense for us just to roll into them and start delivering the information in all the same way. So that's what we did. And in the meantime, Ken and I both, think every hawk we see along the side of the road is a red-tailed hawk because initially that's all you really know. Then we wanted to get better at discerning our hawks. I ended up starting to volunteer at Madison Audubon as a raptor handler, so I've been doing that for the last several years, 4 or 5 years. And I'm much better at identifying hawks along the roadway. I drive up from Lake Geneva at least once a week, if not twice a week, and my game I play is I count red-tailed hawks, I count kestrels, and I have a count usually by the time I get to work, if I don't get distracted. So Brenna calls us the Bald Eagle Socialite Club, so there's our logo. And you get to be part of that. I need to fancy it up a little bit. So I'm going to skip through these pretty quick, but one thing I wanted to show you, so Ozaukee and Washington County are on there as 2 and 1. And then, I don't know what happened to Washington County, it drops to 0 in 2017. And then you're back to 2 and 1 in 2019. But what's interesting is I'm going to trip over the cord. If you look up in Vilas County or Oneida, look at how many nests are in those counties. So those are active bald eagle nests. So in order for the DNR to have produced this and put numbers to it, they were doing flyovers twice a year. They had to see either eggs or an eagle on the nest. If they saw the nest and there was no eagle, there was no egg, it did not get counted. So these were only active nests. But now they're not doing that anymore. So that's where we all become a little bit more important. So general facts on bald eagles. Females are larger than males. It's anywhere from 20 to 30%. In the raptor world, women rule, okay? So they're always larger. And part of that, the thought is because they do the initial incubating, so they have more coverage of the eggs. So they're more bonded to their territory than to each other. So you always hear eagles mate for life. And as long as everything's going well, yeah, a partner could pass avian flu. That male bald eagle brought a different female back the following year, but they did not nest. We all thought they were going to. I don't think she was quite mature enough. They copulated, but they did not lay eggs. So they require a tall tree that gives them a distant view. So if they're on the edge of a forest, they're going to be on literally the edge of it. They're going to have a view on one or two sides so that they can see something coming, so that they get a good broad view. So they're not going to be hidden necessarily in the middle of a forest unless that's the tallest tree and they're up near the top of it. So mortality is high in the first year of life, and I think that's true about raptors all the way across the board, including owls as well. It takes 5 to 7 years for them to reach maturity. That's where they have the all-white head and white tail. So they are specialists, generalists, and they're also scavengers. So they're specialists in that they have spicules on the bottoms of their feet, their talons, that help them to hold on to fish because fish are so slippery. If it's a small fish, they're going to pop it in their mouth right after they catch it. So it's really hard to catch when they come up out of the water with a fish that goes right up into the beak. They swallow it and they fly to the shore and you're like, they dropped that fish. But they didn't. They ate it on the fly. Larger fish they'll bring to shore to pull apart and eat. And then they're generalists. If they can catch a squirrel or raccoon, they'll take it. And they're scavengers, so I'm sure everyone has seen up in this area a deer maybe that got hit, and an eagle is not beyond sitting and eating roadkill. So why are we so lucky to have them back, and when did they disappear? So Paul Smith, who writes for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, he and I talk periodically, and he said, I don't think you get what a big deal it is that bald eagles are back. And I'm like, it's not like we're making them a sushi dinner and sitting them together and introducing them to a nest. We're just observing them. And he's like, no, this is a much bigger deal than you think. And he started to do some research. And DDT came out in World War II. And that started to decrease the nests in the area, but we didn't have them in Milwaukee County or in the surrounding counties anyway. So he went to historians, he went to museums, and he found out that the nearest nest to Milwaukee was in Jefferson County, and that was over 120 years ago. So it's probably more likely to be 200 years ago since we had eagles sort of in this area. And does anyone want to take a guess at why? It is not DDT. And I thought this was pretty cool of him that he thought about this to figure it out. 170 years ago, there weren't any trees because to build Milwaukee and to build the surrounding towns, you needed lumber. So I see you guys shaking your head at the back of the room. Yeah, it's really obvious when you say it, but they needed the lumber to build the city. They needed the lumber to heat the homes, and they needed the lumber to heat the stove to make food. And so, concentric rings going out of any city is taking away any of that tall aged timber that would be the tall tree that the eagles like to nest in. And still, we don't have many of those trees. They're coming up, and there's enough where they're coming back, but it has been an issue that we had deforestation. So the fact that we are we're stopping habitat loss, and we're keeping our forests, we're keeping our bogs, we're keeping some of these fly zones for eagles that are migrating and other birds that are migrating is really critical. I like that eagle giving me a dirty look. So we found some nests in Milwaukee County, and so that was great. They were making a comeback. Tall trees do exist in Milwaukee County. So what can go wrong in a bald eagle's nest? Mother Nature. So sometimes it's just a matter of if there's a dramatic hot-cold variation, a wind or a storm knocks a tree down, knocks the nest out of the tree. Mother Nature can be pretty cruel. If a bald eagle goes off the nest for too long a period of time on a cold day, that's going to render those eggs infertile. So lead in fishing gear and bullet fragments. It's a huge problem right now. That's something everyone can easily fix by moving to copper. Steel, anything but lead. We all know, those of us who are of age, and most of us seem to be of an age, that we remember in the 70s where, you had to get rid of lead paint in your house. If you had peeling paint in a nursery, you had to get rid of it because kids were picking it off the windowsill and eating it. And humans suffered a setback for that. So imagine what a little tiny fragment that you need to render a bald eagle into misery. It's horrible to die from lead poisoning. And if you can get the eagle and get it into a rehab facility, it's still an arduous process, and will it ever recover enough to be released? So West Nile virus is an issue. Consuming poisoned animals. If you have mice in your house, don't poison them. You don't know where that mouse goes and dies, or whatever else it is that you end up poisoning. If you have to get rid of it, and you don't want to have a heart trap, you need to use another method other than poison. Poison just shouldn't be out there. People, man, we're really high up on that list of things that we do wrong. For eagles, I mean, the lead, the poison is on us. What happens too is eagles get disoriented if they have lead poisoning or if they've been poisoned by consuming a already poisoned dead animal. And then when they go to take off, sometimes they don't have the motor skills because those things do affect them. They easily get hit by a car. And then we just had a nest in Milwaukee where they were raising two young. It was a brand new pair of eagles. And no one was really sure whether or not they were fertile and they were going to actually hatch, or were they just going to play house, which can sometimes happen in a nest, especially when they're young. They play house the first year. Second year, they'll come back and they'll start raising young. But they hatched two of the cutest little eaglets, and they both died of avian flu. So the next year, they came back. This past year, they came back. They were on eggs, and the neighbor next door that we had those ice storms, and some trees fell in an area of their yard that is not viewable by anyone, but they had it milled, brought the eagles up off the nest. They started flying around and yelling. They were off the nest for 3 hours. Their eggs went infertile. So again, people, we have to be good neighbors too. So we have to make sure that we don't cause the eagles any distress on their nest. And actually, the photo that's there is that nest where that one youngster there that you see was one of the birds that died from avian flu. So then there was 2022, and again, the 65% of nests fail. This was kind of what happened out in our area. So what happened in 2022? Avian flu moved across the Atlantic to the East Coast in Canada and worked its way into the US via flyways. 3 to 5 weeks of age, eaglets began to die. 2 mature hens, females, died. And in 2023, we had a new hen show up at a nest out by our house. The behavior at the nest changed and finally figured out it was, we know them well enough to know where their roosting spots are. They're creatures of habit, sort of like we are. So when they start hanging out in different places, they're still at the same nest. But it came to realize, oh, that is not the same female. So she must have passed away, potentially from avian flu. So 2 Milwaukee nests rebuilt in other locations of their territory because something so bad happened in their nest, they felt the need to rebuild. which is no, small feat for an eagle's nest. So eagles behave differently at the affected nests. Their posturing was different than I had ever seen, either one of us had ever seen. So adults tried to get the eaglets to react. So this broke my heart. One of the Milwaukee nests, the first one to fledge, in fact, homeowners have a spotting scope. Its nest is half a mile away. And they would watch it, and she texted me and said, "Oh, I just saw the sweetest thing." The adult eagle just flew by and dropped food into the nest. And I turned to Ken and we just went, "Oh, you can't drop food in a nest for a 3 to 5 week old eaglet. They don't have the means with which to eat that food. They can't tear it up. They need to be fed." So what we think it was is the parent was trying to get the eaglet to react. It was dying and picked it up and then dropped it back to the nest to try to get it to do something. And the reason why we think that is because we saw it on nest cameras in other states where that was one of the behaviors that the eagles were doing. So it was sad. So typical nest failure is between 10 and 15%, and that can be whether taking out a nest, taking down a tree, the eagles coming off for too long a period of time and the eggs are infertile. But so that means 52% of the 2022 nest failures we could likely attribute to avian flu. That was devastating. So avian flu is transferred to healthy poultry and raptors via fluids from waterfowl, and it's sort of like fecal matter. So if you remember all of the chicken hatcheries that had to be, all the chickens had to be culled or the turkeys had to be culled, it could have been fecal matter that brought it into those poultry farms and then ended up having a negative effect. So the virus lives in waterfowl like mallards, but it doesn't affect them. The female bald eagle in Milwaukee had avian flu, so why didn't the male? It likely caught the waterfowl that it brought to the female as a form of courtship, but it didn't die. And why did mostly just the eaglets die and not the adults? So I wrote to a veterinarian in Minnesota who was tracking everything that they were doing. They were testing every bird for avian flu. And she said age, overall health, previous exposure to HPAI. Remember, waterfowl almost always carry this virus. It just mutates. The viral load, the local climate, their genes, and question marks. Since you are not seeing loss of adults, perhaps the genetic makeup of the eagles in your area are more related or more resistant. So I'll stop at nothing to figure out why something happens. My mother once said to me she really hated that she ever read me Curious George. So that is part of my charm. So the eagle on the top in the picture of the two eagles is the male looking down at the female. And when we saw the female this day, I was like, she just does not seem right. The very next day, this picture by a neighborhood resident, she's on the ground, she could no longer fly. And she couldn't coordinate even walking. And then here's that photo that you've seen again where she was being administered to at the Humane Society and later had to be euthanized. So the prediction for this year was that it was going to be as bad or worse than it was the previous year. I just kept waiting for bad things to happen. And this is the two little eaglets here in that nest. Those were the two that we knew died of avian flu in Milwaukee County. So, but 2023 ended up being great. We had great success. Where was avian flu? Well, it was out in California because it did affect the condors. So if you follow any of the condors, there was a female that ended up with it, and she ended up succumbing to it. The male was on an egg in a cave, and so they went in to remove the egg because they wanted to get the male out of the cave. If the flu was in there in fecal matter and whatnot, they wanted to get him out of the cave. So they went and they took the egg and they figured it was infertile, but it was still fertile. So they gave that egg to condors in captivity and they raised it and then it was released. So cool story. Oh, there's my numbers. So then, so what happened to avian flu? So Paul Smith of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel did another article about them, and it was said he talked to the lead biologist at the WDNR, who said that they appear to have built up a resistance to it. And I sure hope that's the case, because it was really tough to live through. So eagles and other raptors have hopefully powered through avian flu at this point in time. But it's still there. It's always going to be there. So every year is going to be a wait and see. So off the topic of avian flu, so individual nests can dramatic differently. So these are two nests that Ken and I watch, and we've watched since we were first able to see these nests. And so in 2019, the Racine nest fledged one bird. The Walworth County fledged two. And so you can see down at the bottom, total eaglets in 5 years, the Racine nest has raised 3 to fledge, whereas the other one has raised 12 to fledge. So there's a dramatic difference between nests and what a pair of eagles is capable of doing. So the Walworth nest is one of our favorite nests, and we've been watching it a little bit longer than this, but it's nice to see it do well, but there's a variation across the board on what you can get by way of a nest. So in 2023, the bald eagles in Milwaukee County tried again, and then again, Paul did an article about them and used our photos again. And so this is one thing that I'm going to brag on for just a minute. And it matters not at all, but in this, he likened my text message to him, letting him know that we had a fledge finally in Milwaukee County with what Neil Armstrong said when he landed on the moon, that the eagle has landed. And what he had no idea was Neil Armstrong is a Purdue graduate, and I hate to tell y'all, but so am I. And my dad, if he was still alive, would have been more proud of that comment than probably even me graduating. So, and then Mikey Lifestyle did a thing on the eagle's return, and this happens to be Glory from Schlitz Audubon on the cover. And again, the photos Ken took of the eaglet fledging. So how does it all begin? So eagles meet, they pick a territory. Out in our area, it's about 3 square miles. It probably is up here as well. But if you remember how many nests there are up in the northern counties, it's down to a half a mile between nests. So they pick a tree, one with a view, and build a really, really heavy nest in this kind of weather. So she conveys in her way it's time. This was last year, not quite a year ago, and boy, he did not like this. So now he's looking at her, and then he bites her. And he flew away. And then they came back and they yelled at one another for a few minutes. And then this happened. And for about as long as I take to show you those slides, that was it. So then they're back in their nest and pretty quickly got on eggs. This is a Milwaukee nest. The eagle on the left is sitting up higher. It's not just her head showing anymore, so that's one of the ways you can usually tell they're possibly on chicks now, because they sit up higher. And again, back to our little sad chicks in that one nest. This is a nest out by us, and there are 3 little fuzzy heads in that nest. I didn't think that nest was quite big enough, but they kept going. And then this is yet a different nest. This is the nest that has only raised 3 eaglets. And this is one of the other ones in Walworth that the other one that has raised 12. Back to the one in Racine. And then this is us back to Sauk City. So one of the things that we have done that I never thought we'd do is we have picked up a bald eagle off the ground. And the funny thing about this is this was a 3 eaglet nest. The watcher is the girl there in the tan in front with the stripe across her purse across her shoulder. So she was very upset, crying. They had not seen the adults in quite a long while. She'd seen an adult bald eagle who was on the ground, who was showing symptoms of not being well. Before the DNR could get there to pick it up, it was gone. So don't know what happened, but she saw 3 go to 2, and then she saw 2 go to 1, and she couldn't stand there and monitor the nest any longer. And so asked Drew and Brenna if they could please intercede. And so you can't just go to a bald eagle nest and take an eagle out of it. You know, you have to have U.S. Fish and Wildlife give approval. You have to have the DNR give approval. It has to go to Drew and Brenna. So Drew works his connections. He got U.S. Fish and Wildlife to say go ahead. And he asked me if I could get some arborists out there to climb the tree. I did get a local Milwaukee arborist who was willing to go out there. It's a 2-hour drive. And then I said, you know, before I do that, let me see if I can just cold call an arborist and talk them into this. And I did, so which was shocking. So Ken and I ended up having to go out there so that, you know, we could bring the group together. I was doing COVID tests in the car on my way out. And I tell the guys, if you see a bird down on the ground, dead bird, do not go near it. We need to get in gear in order to pick up that bird. We're going to put it in a plastic bag and we're going to leave it under the tree, let the DNR come pick it up so that they can test it. And so they're all like, okay, okay. And I'm like, so keep your eyes out for other birds. Okay, okay. They all start walking up to the nest, so the arborists are figuring out how to climb the tree. And I'm like, Ken and I like take pictures of them at the tree and we start walking. And then I'm like, did anybody notice the live eaglet on the ground walking around? They all walked right by it. And I said to Ken, I had my back to them, I'm like, what did they do when I said that? And he said, they all looked up in the tree because the eaglet was still there. So there was one in the tree in the nest, and there was one that had jumped out of the nest, probably hoping to find food. They were both emaciated, but they survived. So this is us posing with our good deeds. There are the 2 kids in a glamorous box in the back of a truck. And they were taken up to Antigo, where they were placed with a non-releasable adult male who taught them eagle behaviors. And it was about this time last year, then they were released out in Sauk City. So intense flapping is what comes next. Once they grow up to being about the size of their parents, then flapping becomes the thing. And initially they're going to hold on to a stick or the nest. And the first time they let go and they get air, you can almost register the panic. And here I'm anthropomorphizing because they plant themselves back and they kind of squat. They're like, oh wow, I let go, you know. So there's, you know, it's kind of baby steps to get them to the point where they're doing this. And, you know, they're raring to go at this point. They're getting air, they know it. I like the other one sitting there watching it. When there's 3 of them, it seems to me that it goes in order of the first hatch as the first one to be brave. And the third one, again, always seems to be Velcroed in the nest. It does not want to leave. It's, wow, we got those other 2 birds out of here. I got plenty of room. I'm just going to sit here and let myself get fed by my parents for the next year or 2. So once they fledge, the adults will bring them food out on a branch. And you can see the one eaglet has a nice huge fish there. And the adult in the background, you get the sense that he is smaller than his offspring. And he is, I'm sure, probably smaller because, again, they haven't been flying around. And that is a male. And you can kind of get a feel for it after a while of the proportion of white versus brown on them once you've been looking at them long enough. And then when they fledge, some of them seem to fledge to the tiniest branch that they can. And I think they still think they're small, but they're not. They don't understand how quite big they are. So this one fledged, and then it started to try to walk down the tree. to its parent, and I would just love to know what that conversation is that they're having between themselves. But I think he just forgot he had wings. So again, fledge to the smallest branch. And if you're going to stick a landing, make sure the branch shows up. So we did watch this eagle take a tumble. Eaglet took a tumble through the tree, and you kind of think it's funny, and then you're immediately mortified, because if you break a wing, you know, going into rehab is not the thing that you want to see these animals go through. But they do awkward things like this. And that might last a week or so, and then, boy, they get the hang of it. But back to that, if you noticed, a lot of these pictures are all in snag trees. Snags are super important. Almost every eagle pair we know has a snag nearby, which is a dead tree or, you know, a tree that's not leafing out, because an eaglet can see a branch. It's more comfortable fledging to something that doesn't have leaves on it. So it can see, where is there a sturdy spot for me to land. So this one I call gelatinous eaglet. This poor bird, it blew out of a tree. It was ready to fledge, but the nest was high, and it struggled to get up to a branch, to the point where there were people around, there were people approaching it, and it just had nothing more to give. It could not, it lost all bone structure there. But it went to rehab. Apparently it preferred tenderloin instead of fish. And then it was reunited with its hatchmate. And they did the longest love scene of crossing an open field. It took forever for these two birds. It probably took a whole half an hour, don't you think?
Yeah.
And when they got close to one another, they tumbled around for a couple of minutes together. They vocalized, and then they both walked off. So this was a premature fledge at a nest out by us, which is the worst kept secret, and it ended up coming down into a fairly busy road right in front of one of its watchers who was driving home. So there's Ken and the watcher, so we went and retrieved the eaglet and took it into rehab. So eaglets can spend quite a bit of time on the ground. It's easy for the adults to feed them if they can just drop food down into an open grassy area and let the eaglets duke it out after they've fledged. Snags, again, really critical. This is a 3 eaglet nests, the one in Walworth County, and watching them all take turns on being top of the pyramid and move around is always interesting. So after fledging, you know, they get to be pretty solid flyers. That's one of the things that the parents do. Once they fledge the nest, they aren't on their own. They're going to learn how to maneuver trees, how to land in a leafed tree, you know, what's the best approach to something. They're going to learn all sorts of things from watching their parents. This is not an unusual posture to see. It's hot by the time they fledge. Cold is not a problem for the eagles as much as it is heat. So you'll see eaglets and eagles sometimes dangling a foot. I used to think there was something wrong with the eaglet and the eagle, and now it's very commonplace. This is also very commonplace. If it's hot, they're going to open up their wings, sort of if you've ever seen a great blue heron do it. Eagles do it as well. So adults will start to leave the fledglings for longer periods of time. Once they're big and they don't have to worry about a great horned owl or anything else flying in to steal it, they'll start leaving them for longer periods of time. But I like this picture. He's preening, but he's still watching me. But juvenile or subadult bald eagles, so ones past their first 3 months in life, they are a danger to the nest. You don't want to see last year's kids coming back to the nest, or previous years, or any random eaglet coming by your nest. And eaglets, subadults will exploit a nest if they find it, because they know that young were in there being fed. So if they can go in there and get a half-eaten fish, it's an easy meal for them. But they are a danger. One of our nests in Racine County this past year, the homeowner happened to catch a subadult picking the eaglet up out of the nest and starting to fly off with it. He scared it and it dropped the eaglet, and it was injured enough that it was going to be in permanent residency somewhere. But as it turned out, it was not recovering from its injuries very well, and it had to be euthanized. So that was one of its own that did that to it and was potentially going to make a meal of it. So this is Ken. We're out in a wetland, and it was dry last year. This was a nest where we thought, there was an eaglet in a nest, and we just could not find it, and it would have just fledged. And you can't really see it, but it is in that photo. When I turned around to take this picture, I'm like, I see it. And it is like way, way, way back there. It's right there. And that's how good you get at spotting eagles after a while. So they don't have to be fully white. They can be mostly mature when they first start nesting. This again was the Milwaukee nest that laid the two that were lost to avian flu. So parent lessons, you can't kid your kid to move out of the house. Eaglets have the same issue. Eagles have the same issue. So we have watched that third one that's Velcroed in the nest. Parents stop feeding it. It will not get fed. What they will do is they'll catch a fish. They'll take it out to the tip of the branch where the nest is at, and they'll make it walk out there and get it. And you think, those other two are going to come in and take that fish, and there is some dialogue going on between them. Those other two that have fledged don't move, and that eaglet will sit in that nest and cry until eventually it decides to go out there and get it. And it has taken hours. It just wants to be served in bed. So that's how they get kids out of their basement. So they teach eaglets to demand food and even to steal it from a parent. So likewise, a parent will steal food back from an eaglet. So it's teaching them to finesse find, hunting, and how to survive. If worse comes to worse, how do you survive? So here is a parent flying. It just did circles, and all three fledglings were just like, look at that fish. And it went and landed next to one of the fledglings, and it ate the whole thing. So you can see the fledgling does not look terribly happy. And it was barking that it wanted the food, but the parent didn't give it to it. So it was trying to entice that bird, we think, to steal it. So first year eagles, you can always see how those couple of feathers stick out a little bit further beyond the wing. So these are longer. So it's going through a molt, and these feathers are its new feathers. Those are its fledgling feathers. When they fledge, they have longer tail feathers and longer wing feathers so that they can navigate better. Once they make it through their first year of life, which is, the 50% loss range, then they get their adult size plumage. So now we've witnessed behavior that goes against the norm. And I'm always calling Drew saying, you won't believe what I saw today. So this picture on the left, it looks perfectly normal. That bird fledged like a month earlier, came back to the nest and cried like a baby. And the adult shredded fish up into tiny little pieces and fed it to it. So it was just curiosity. The other bird there is a 2-year-old, roughly. I say it's a 2-year-old because its eyes are still brown, its beak is still mostly brown. It was a nest that had 2 eaglets that fledged, And all of a sudden there were 3. And I'm like, why is that one such a weird color? And then I saw the 3rd one come over and I'm like, oh, it's an interloper. And it sat there and cried like an eaglet for food in hopes of getting fed, because why go catch it yourself if you can get somebody to bring it to you for free? And then, can anyone tell me how many little eaglets are in that nest? 4. So this is the thruple that's up at the Thousand Island area. And so we think it's 2 females and a male, and both females laid 2 eggs. You don't see that very often. So the big picture here is pretty bizarre. This is out in Walworth by us. We were shocked. It seems like these 2 hatchlings have to be from 2 different clutches, not just like a first egg and a 3rd egg, but like they laid a clutch of eggs, only 1 survived, and then they laid a 2nd clutch of eggs. And because the age disparity is just huge between the one that's big and brown, which unfortunately has a stick in front of its face, and then the gray one. But they both did fledge, but they fledged like a month apart. So over in those little sections of photos, another BENW volunteer witnessed a same year hatch year. It was picking apart a fish and feeding it to its younger sibling. The parent's sitting out there on the branch, but one of the hatchlings is feeding the other hatchling, which had never been witnessed before that we're aware of. So give eagles their space. So I took this photo, and I liked it until I realized we were a problem. So I have a great staff that I can talk to at Schlitz and ask questions to, and I'm like, the birds are behaving like this. You know, do you think it's us being there, or do you think it's this or that? And they're like, well, are you keeping your distance? And it's like, yeah. And then Ken walked to the car to get another pair of binoculars, and this eagle just dipped ever so slightly at Ken. And it's like, oh, we are the problem. We packed up our stuff and we left, and we replaced ourselves on that nest. Because if that eagle sees us as a threat, the last thing I want to do is be responsible for driving eagles off their nest or to go to some other area. So when you have a camera, it can be like a big eyeball staring at them. And this is like a public ground, but nobody pays a lot of attention to them. It's on a golf course. And so they're very used to carts going by and people looking at them, taking a cell phone picture and keep going. But when we're there with a big camera for an hour doing observation, and they know we're there and they know who we are, I think they know our vehicle. You know, their eyesight is 8 times better than ours. So what does that mean? I don't know what 8 times better than ours means. But they can see a half a mile to a mile away at a rabbit. So they certainly can recognize people who they think are a threat to their nest. They don't mind us so much, but when there's young in that nest and those young are vulnerable, they don't want us anywhere near it. So we replaced ourselves, and they are happy eagles to this day. This just happened to be a bald eagle fishing. This is what's going to happen at this time of year where you get convocation of eagles. They're very territorial. They do not want other eagles around, except for when it's hard to find food. They're much more accepting of one another. Their hormones are not driving them at this point in time to go to the nest and start laying eggs. So there's some tolerance. So with eagles rebounding, why is the BENW still needed? Well, HPAI is one reason. There is still issues going on, and it's good to monitor them because Paul Smith was saying that we are one of the only organizations that tracked that. So this is the one on the left. You know, I'm sure you've heard about the bald eagles being shot. I think there were 2 down in Franklin. There was one. What? There's one up near me. Was yeah, Ozaukee. And what the DNR has told me is that it tends to be kids on a dare most of the time. But Montana man accused of killing 3,600 birds. This was yesterday or the day before. It was in the news, and he was killing golden eagles and bald eagles and selling them for parts. So he got caught. He's gonna, to me, there's not enough time in the world to give this person for doing that. I just find it kind of reprehensible. But on the topic of HPAI, the nest where I told you in Milwaukee County, the 2 little eaglets died of the virus. We were able to get approval like at the very last minute to go and retrieve those bodies out of the nest. Ken and I were certain they were dead. We got an arborist to climb the nest. There was only 1 of 2 bodies in the nest, so it had already been predated by a great horned owl. That 1 little body that was in there got taken away by the conservation officer who met us there. That bird was tested, and it did indeed have avian flu. That was the one and only eaglet tested in this entire state. And so it was heart-wrenching for us to do it. I didn't like seeing that little body. It was really pretty devastating, although I haven't cried since, about it. But at least its little life went to prove that avian flu was killing eaglets in the nest, and we have data to back up to be able to say that 52% that was out of the norm of nest death that year was, and we know the adults were dying, we had adults dying from it, but we have proof that the 1 eaglet did indeed die from avian flu. Unfortunately, the predation of the other body in that nest, if it went to go feed great horned owlets, then that probably would have caused their death as well. So those are the sad things about it. The happy things about it is finding 4 baby eaglets in a nest, or seeing an adult, a fledgling being fed like a baby, and just seeing some of the oddities that we see where 2 fledglings are feeding one another. We did think we were seeing that at one of our Walworth nests, but we couldn't prove it. We couldn't document it, but we did have a one sharing food with the other. So it's interesting to see the behavior. Nobody really studies everything about eagles all the time. And if anyone tells you they know everything there is about eagles, it could only possibly be me. No, just kidding. Because I maybe know, 5%. There's so much to know. There's so much behavior to witness that until there's a citizen science project like this that's doing it, and you guys are all seeing the things that you're seeing, and you're bringing that feedback to me and to Drew and to Brenna, we don't really know what goes on. And so the fact that we were there to witness a horrible event like HPAI, we're all the better for it, for knowing what happens and to know what to look for next time around. But I'm hoping everything is going to be like 2023 was, and 2024 is going to be back to being just as wonderful, and not having any downsides, and not having anybody shoot another eagle either. So I think I'm done, unless you guys have a question. Thank you. So yes, yeah.
When I was in Alaska, we were
Oh my gosh.
in an area with lots of eagles, and a native guy was with us, and I said, could I pick up one of these feathers?
Oh yeah.
Now, what is that just an Alaska thing?
Nope. No, well, in fact, you cannot possess a feather or anything from any raptor in the United States. So indigenous people have the first rights of feathers. And the second problem with it is if you're caught with feathers, how do they know you're not the Montana man that they're looking for who shot 3,600 birds? So how did you get those feathers? They don't know that you didn't get it by harming a bird. So you can possess no part of any raptor. You find a feather, take a picture of it, put your foot in the picture, take a picture of it. There are encyclopedias online that will help you do feather ID, and there are groups on Facebook that do feather ID. So, but nope, don't get caught with the feather. And if you have a friend that's from the DNR, don't invite them over for dinner if you did. So, yes.
You had several pictures of 3 eaglets in a nest. How common is that, and do they?
Oh, great question.
Do all 3 usually survive?
2 great questions. So we have yet to witness where from the first minute you see a beak come up to take food, I wait until I always tell everyone who volunteers, there's no prize for being the first one to say, I see 3, there's 3 eaglets, because maybe there's 2. Maybe, wings, when they put up, a wrist, it looks like it's a beak. So wait until you're sure. So until we see 3 beaks or 2 beaks, we don't say how many eaglets we think are in the nest. But when we can call it and we see the 3 beaks up, those 3 beaks have all grown up. So one of the things that Drew told me, and it again made perfect sense when someone with a lot more experience than me said it, was, well, because you have a lot of 3 eaglet nests in your area, that just tells you there's an abundance of food. So, and then, the female is what regulates how many eggs she's going to lay and how many are, potentially fertile too. So was that did I answer both of them? Yeah, I did. Okay. Yes?
Why did the DNR stop monitoring?
I think. Yeah. It wasn't because the people we work with didn't want to continue. So it wasn't because they didn't want to stay involved. I think it comes from on high. Yes?
Is it more common to have an eagle nest near water? Or
Yes. Doesn't have to be a lake.
farther away from water? Or is it?
They're going to be close to water. They don't have to be over water. They just want to be somewhere near it. In some cases, we have them on a little bog, and we know where the river is that they really like to fish at, but they will stay near water. So remember, they're specialists on fish. Fish is their number 1 diet source. Yep.
I just want to share an experience. My husband and I were able to catch an eaglet. Years ago, we went on one of the natural resources foundation things, and a guy went up the tree to bring the young ones down.
Yeah.
And they were, 6 weeks old. They were huge.
Yeah. Talons.
The talons.
Yeah.
Were just huge. It was a cool experience.
Yeah, and it's daunting when you're on a busy road and a bird is flapping and it's injured and you've got to pick it up too. So we like to throw a towel around it just to, because we don't want to hurt the wings picking it up. But if you notice, we were not, any of us, concerned about the beak. I have a parrot. When I started working at Schlitz and I was interviewing to be a raptor handler, I said, I have a parrot. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. It's like, parrots, just forget you have a parrot, because it's nothing like a raptor. And I'm like, oh, how can that be? Oh my gosh, they were so right. They have nothing in common. I'm afraid of my parrot's beak. I am not afraid of an eagle's beak. I'm afraid of the eagle's talons. So in the case of our raptor, what it'll do is it'll foot you. This is where my husband also comes in handy, where it'll, if it's feeling threatened and it gets a talon free, it's going to hit you with it, and you don't want to get hit by it. I had a friend, he's 6'5", big dude, lives down in Florida. He had a little screech owl make a nest in a 1-gallon black pot, that he bought a plant in, and it was hanging off a nail in his garage. It laid 2 eggs in there, and it was raising young. He went to go sit in the lawn chair. It came up from behind him and hit him in the back and knocked him over. A 1/4-pound bird. And so I asked Schlitz, I asked the staff there, do you think that can happen? And they went, oh, yeah, that can happen. And it's like, wow, just the force that something that weighs so little can bring is, you gotta respect it.
The one thing I found amazing when we experienced this was that they said the eagles will not, they'll go above and keep circling the nest, they won't come down. We were actually supposed to be on.
You mean to come at you?
Yeah, or even come down to the nest while
Yeah.
you're there. We were supposed to see ospreys, but the eagles came into the territory and the ospreys moved out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of push and pull between, great horned owls, osprey, eagles. They're all kind of up there, and they can assert the dominance over one another, or try to. Yeah, Courtney.
I had a question coming from Zoom that says, has BENW studied the eagles nesting near the Cedar Grove Ornithology Research Station?
Well, we don't say where eel nests are. Those are, and one of the things I should say to all of you is if you decide you want to volunteer with us, first of all, we don't know where all the nests are up here because I'm from Lake Geneva and I'm the closest to you. So who's organizing counties. So I want to go back to my 3 or 4 counties and have and get you guys up and running. So we need to know where your eagle nests are. When you share that information with us, it's confidential. We're not going to go on somebody's private property and tell them you have to do this or that or any. We just want to observe the eagles. If that homeowner, landowner wants to be the observer of that nest, that's perfectly fine. One of us will work with them, and you have to take the class with us. We'll help you out, and you can observe your own nest. So we're very amenable, very agreeable. What we want is our success rate, and we want to help out if there's a problem at that nest. So that is a long-term nest, and I know it's bounced around in a few different places, but yes, that's one that we need a watcher on. Yes?
And my next question is just kind of open to the whole purpose of us being here tonight is if people that attended here tonight, if they are interested in volunteering, how do they get involved with that? What's the next step for people that are here in person or Zoom? How would you like them to?
Well, people who are here, they can email Brenna. She is one of the people who collects data for it, so you can also give it to me. I'm happy to take it. You have people at home, you can send them my email address or you can send them Brenna's. Either one of us, let us know where it's at. We like getting coordinates. If you can do a coordinate of where the eagle nest is, that's the best way of doing it. And then whoever gives us those coordinates, if they're coordinates that we haven't had before and you want to be the washer of it, we are closed down, the southeast part, the Socialite Club, we're closed. We have enough volunteers, but not up here. So we can work you into the program. January 20th at 10 a.m. is our meeting. It's a Zoom meeting. And if you can't make that meeting, then you can listen to it afterwards, but you will need to sign a non-disclosure agreement that you will never tell anybody else where an eagle nest is. And that, you're going to look out for those eagles before you look out for, yourself getting a like for a picture on Facebook. We take these pictures, very few of them ever make it on social media anywhere, because we don't consider ourselves photographers. We spend some money on some equipment, but it's because, I told him one day the nest where we tested got the one little body of the eaglet out. I'm like, I saw movement. I think I may have caught an eaglet in a photo. And I'm like, see if you can see what the darker image is on the photo. Because I'm far enough away and I have a long enough lens. I know something was going on, but I couldn't tell exactly. And he goes, oh, you did. You caught some really great little white fluffy heads. And I'm like, no, they were dark. I was seeing the shadow of the eaglet, and I was focusing on that. I know eaglets are white, but somehow I thought it was shaded under the adult bird. So it isn't sometimes until I get home that I can look at my photos that I can see what was going on in that nest, and then I do my reports. So, yes?
If we do volunteer and we get in the program, I find a nest in someone else's friend's nest, but we don't know that they're looking at the same nest that I am. Is that possible that it happens, or?
We put the two of you in a cage and we let you duke it out. Yeah. Yeah. No, there is no problem with having, we have many nests that have two different watchers on it. And we do that for a reason, like a couple of you, a husband and wife might do it. And then we have a mother and daughter in the back that are starting this year. So you would be considered two different groups of watchers.
Would we know? Would
I will tell you. And then you can coordinate through yourselves, you can never do Wednesdays or Thursdays, but Wednesdays and Thursdays work for you. So you're going to do either Wednesday or Thursday. She's going to do one of the other 5 days a week so that you're there on different days. That's your goal, is just to be there on different days. And it's once a week for an hour.
Up to an hour.
What?
Up to an hour.
Up to an hour. Well, we were doing 7 nests, so as soon as we saw, they're egg rolling, we took off. Oh, and about an egg roll is a beak coming down or a balled up fist rolling an egg in a nest. They're very careful not to puncture it. Mostly we see beaks rolling the egg, and then they'll go back down on the nest, and then I say they do this squishy thing, and where they do this until they get back down. I'm sorry if no one caught that visual, but they do that to make sure their body mass is over the eggs and their skin is in contact with the eggs, because they will pluck like a chicken will, to get a brood patch, again, to keep those eggs warm. Yeah, Courtney?
Sorry, so many questions. Is there a slide of Brenna or yours email that we could pull real quick for the Zoom people to be able to write it down?
It's on these brochures.
I just want to make sure we have the Zoom camera aimed there so that there are a couple.
It would have been at the very front slide of Brenna's.
There we go.
This has a name, isn't it?
Oh. I will gladly email it out tonight if you want to give me, if you want to send me the list of people and say Beth will share with you the information, I will give.
If you go to Madison Audubon or Badgerland Bird Alliance,
Right.
her email address
It's
is on that.
all over the internet. Why it's not right here, that's, yeah. But it is, yeah, it should be on all of those handouts. Mine is not, but if you go online, you'll get mine. So, and I should say, I am the coordinator for the Socialite Club. So we cover Walworth, Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, and now you guys. So what we're looking to do is maybe partner up with someone up here who will organize your area, because if you have an emergency, you don't want to wait for me to drive over an hour to get up here to help you. So we'll get you started, and then we want to get someone else up here who's closer by who can help facilitate you in going into next year. Yes?
When you found the nest in Milwaukee, were you actively looking for it? Did somebody see eagles, so you thought there might be a nest somewhere?
Well,
or did you stumble
okay.
across it?
So you can't do it now, but when you could go under the Hone Bridge, Michael's has it all closed off now because they're doing that dredge of the river and they're putting it next to the ferry. But you used to be able to go under there and sit. And we would go there and count how many eagles we would see. And we saw 13, 14, 15 eagles underneath there. So we knew it was a flyway, but we're like, all these eagles coming through there, some of them are picking this spot to land. So there was a very public attempt at nesting on the south side of Milwaukee in a neighborhood where the mature female died of avian flu. And then last year, we were on the phone with Drew telling him what we were seeing, because he brought a new female back, and it was unlike anything I've ever witnessed. I mean, Ken yelled, "Hit the deck!" And there was a couple dog walkers. We were all standing there near the nest, and he had a coot, and she wanted it. And part of courtship is you give her the coot. It's a coot is a little bird. So he wanted the coot. And he would fly into the nest, and he'd try to start eating it, and she'd come flying in, and she was a big bird. And he would take off again, and he was panting. And eventually, she got the bird, but they were flying right down the alley, right at us. There's dogs, and Drew's listening to the whole thing on the phone, and he's like, oh, what I would give to be there. This is unreal what you're seeing. And those eagles were not the least bit shy, but we've not seen them return this year. So they may, but they also may not. Yes?
Just a story from last year. We have some deer land up in Madison County, and my cousin and I were going up there to clean out the wood duck boxes for spring. And just around Amro off of 21 there's some wetland and farmland along that stretch. And in a couple mile stretch, we saw close to 50 eagles.
Oh.
They were probably migrating
Yeah.
back up as water started to open, but that was amazing.
Yeah, you, along the Mississippi and the Wisconsin River, I think it's better in Mississippi, like down around Dubuque
I
is
seen the Wisconsin River too, we were fishing
Oh.
out there in spring.
Yeah.
It was just,
craziness.
yeah.
Craziness. But Lake Michigan is the same thing. It's a flyway, so you'll see them out on the break wall. So we go look for them and just, you know, keep an eye on how many are flying through, although now we can't do it. We can't really see that as well as we used to. Yes?
So, I have a question. You said,
No, you can't have a question.
so, you said earlier that they don't like hanging out in large groups unless it's like beneficial to them, or were you scared?
When the waters freeze over, like we're going to have this coming week, we're going to start freezing over. So some of your ponds here are not going to be accessible. Those eagles need to go somewhere else to fish. And then beyond that, they need to go, and then, you know, depending on how cold it gets for how long. So where can you go where you know there's open water? A dam. You go to a dam. If you want to see a convocation of eagles, go to a dam.
So what I was getting at,
I'm not cursing, by the way.
I also took a trip to Alaska, like another
Yeah.
participant here, and we were going up the fjords, and up in Juneau, I guess, there's just a bunch of them kind of all just sitting, but it was really weird to see like 16 eagles sitting on an iceberg and just
Yeah.
hanging out. So I was like,
Well, and if you see the fishermen up there, there's videos of the fishermen as they're, you know, separating their fish out. Eagles are all over the deck of the boat waiting to snatch the fish. So they're not, they've learned to sort of cohabitate with humans. Homer, Alaska, I think, has the highest population of eagles. And we've been to Alaska, and we were going, I don't know, it was like a Publix. We were going to the grocery store, and there were all these eagles. And we're taking pictures. Someone walks by and goes, tourists. And I'm like, come on, how can you not be impressed with all these eagles? And they're like, yeah, wait till you have to clean their droppings off your car. You won't be so excited anymore. And it's like, wow, now I'm volunteering to clean up eagle poop at Schlitz so I can handle raptors. So, you know, obviously it doesn't bother me, but yeah, they treat them like they're crows or any other nuisance bird, you know, that, oh, they're just a pain. So, yeah, very different perception when we've been without them for so long. So, any other questions? Anyone know where an eagle's nest is and wants to tell us? Come on up afterwards. Anyone want to volunteer, even though you're stuck with Ken and I for a while? Well, that's good. We want to get your information. We want to collect eagles' nests, and we want to have enough nests to put you all on them, even if you have to fight in a cage for, you know, yeah. Yes.
I would just make a suggestion as a host. Everyone that's here tonight, your name is on that list because you signed up. If you would like to be a volunteer, please write yes or put a, you know, something next to your name.
Yeah.
Where I can add you all to an email and connect you guys so that you
Yeah.
can get information about the 20th meeting, you know, what the next steps are. If you want to share a nest now, that's great, but you could also send a private, you know, email or something like that once you are connected. But I just want to make sure no one walks away tonight and doesn't, like, oh, I really wanted to volunteer, but I wasn't able to put my name down.
Would it be
And the Cedarburg,
And they also have Brenna's email.
You're right.
Someone in the group sent it out.
the Cedarburg, I went to go find it. I think what I found was the old nest in the white pine. I know it's by a house. I'd like to have confirmation of that, you know. And if, again, that person wants to watch that nest, I need to get eyes on the nest, get a correct GPS, get it back to Brenna. They keep a master list of where all the nests are that the DNR actually started. So that when the DNR stepped back, instead of all of their information sitting in a box or being deleted, they gave it all to Drew and Brenna. So it's a big undertaking that they have. And as you could see from the map, we're only maybe halfway into Wisconsin. So all those nests up north, those 175 nests, we don't know if those birds are there. I mean, we don't have a plane to fly around, and that's a lot of forest to go looking for an eagle's nest. So we're doing what we can.
What do you need for volunteer? Do you need a spotting scope?
You need $1,000 in cash to me. You do not. If you do not have a camera or a spotting scope, Madison Audubon will loan it to you. So you can get a loan from them. We have a list of preferred dealers, they're all in Madison, who will give a discount to a BENW volunteer to buy a scope or buy camera equipment. I haven't finagled anything with Art's camera or anything like that, but you can certainly advocate on your own behalf too to see if you can secure yourself a discount. I don't think it's anything more than 5 or something %, but it's at least something. But you can basically rent it from Madison Audubon, a scope.
If you want to buy one, what kind do you recommend?
Drew has some suggestions. We don't use a scope, we use a camera.
Yeah, you gotta have a pretty good.
Yeah, we aren't going on vacation. So we went to Costa Rica. We're between cameras in Costa Rica. Yeah, we're going nowhere. Anyone else have a question? Yeah.
When you know of a nest, do you have to have signage around it or not?
No, we're not going to ever tell anybody where the nest is. We're only going to tell the watchers. The watchers are going to report on it. And what I do as a watcher is, because we were watching so many nests, what I would do is, actually he came up with the idea, is when we got to the nest, he'd do a screen save of the weather, of that area, wherever that nest is. So, because one of the things you're going to fill out is the weather conditions. How windy was it? Oh, it's so nice when the phone tells you 11 miles per hour out of the southeast. I don't know how fast the wind is going. That is not a skill I have. So, you end up putting down that information. Then we do a screen save when we leave, so we know how long we were at the nest. You put that information in. You say did you see A1? Did you see A2? That means adult 1, adult 2. I always make her adult 1. I figure she's doing the load. So you don't need to be able to tell them apart, a male from a female. You just have to say, you saw A1, A2 wasn't there, and you saw A1 do an egg roll. So funny things we've seen, the other bird flies in, we'll pick the other bird up by the tail, trying to get it off the nest so it can sit on the nest. So,
Looks at you and says, what are you doing with that camera?
again, you tell them, let's get in a cage, and as soon as you tell them what you're doing, I have slid down a hill into a tree on the side of a road during the ice storm last year. He was not real thrilled with my phone call because I was not listening very well at that moment. I hit a tree, and I slid sideways down the hill. So police officers could not have been kinder, and we will.
Half the time they're going like, we have eagles here?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it'll get you fired from your nest, but you can always say, see that thing right over there? That's a bald eagle's nest. So.
I live in the town of Cedarburg, and I'm really near the Cedar Creek. And I saw an eagle flying over one day, but I'm not sure where the nest is. I'm assuming that it's probably more near the Walker River than it is towards the creek area.
It doesn't necessarily make logical sense to you. And somebody asked me about finding the Milwaukee nest. Why did we go find it? I think I got off topic, but the DNR person, I sent a couple pictures of things that look like the start of a nest. And then she wrote in red letters to me, "Do not tell anybody about it." And I'm like, oh, we were probably about a block off. I went back, circled a block wider, there it was. It was like a Volkswagen Bug turned upside down in a tree a half mile off the road, but you couldn't miss it.
Sometimes we're looking for things and we see something, and then a lot of times people are reporting it to somebody. We think there's eagles in the area. What are they, if they're still in the area, then maybe there's a nest, so we'll go out looking for it.
People will say to us all the time, we live by Geneva Lake, there is a nest on this manor. I see the eagle there all the time. It's like, yeah, it's fishing. It doesn't have a nest there. I know where that eagle's nest is. But they think because they see an eagle that there's a nest. So you are looking for a pretty big, you saw some of those stick nests. It's hard to not see that. Now, if they're in a white pine, they're much trickier to see. He has shifted my head right there. And I'm like, I don't see it. And then it's like, oh, a bird flew into it. Now I see it. But when they're in white pines, they're flat. They're not this, martini glass shape. They tend to be flatter.
If you do get a chance to volunteer to do this, what is the best time of the day to do this?
That, you're going to determine that based on your nest. So there are certain nests we'll only go to in the morning because the morning sun shines on the nest. So why go in the afternoon when it's in shadow? We want to see, and early morning, later afternoon are kind of the best times because that's when they're a little bit more active. But we have rarely found, the idea is you have to sit there an hour because within an hour, you'll see something happen. So within an hour, the mate's going to bring in a fish to eat for the one on the nest. They're going to get up and roll the egg. They're going to lean their butt over the back of the nest and take care of business. Never stand under an eagle nest, never. And just so you know, the eaglets poop in the nest. The food all stays in the nest. They do not do nest cleaning. So you do want a good rain to come by periodically.
I'm curious, when you're down here and the eagle's way up there, how do you see it roll an egg?
Well, you can't be that close to the nest. You have to be 300 feet away.
Right. Then you said you can see
Oh, yeah.
it. How do you do that? Why
Through a
do you sit down
scope.
on that?
You're looking at it through a scope.
They're sitting
Yep.
down and they stand up, and then they do something and
They'll rouse, they'll poop, they'll come back, they'll put their head down, and they're doing this. No. You see the gesturing of the head. So the gesturing of a head when it's rolling an egg versus food came into the nest, and now you see that eagle's head go down, and it goes, and it just pulled a piece of meat off. You'll see it jerking. So you can tell when it's pulling food. And then it'll break it up into little pieces, and then it always turns its head sideways and comes up like this. So that's how you can tell. I have never done an eagle impersonation before, and I'd like to apologize to everybody on Zoom. Yes. That's really something I don't ever want to watch. And this is stuff you're going to learn in the January 20th class. And you're going to call me with 20 million questions, and all of you are going to do it to me. And I'm going to say, well, it's probably an egg roll given the time of year. When she starts sitting up higher on the nest, she's got hatchlings underneath. And it's just a skill you're going to develop. We didn't know anything about eagles when we started doing it. When we decided to go prove them wrong and find a Walworth eagle nest, we didn't know what we were looking at, which is why the DNR said go take the class with the BENW and learn more properly about eagles. At Schlitz, I'm learning about captive eagles and what eagles do in the wild, but I'm not sitting there looking at it. So it's different. So two things came together, and it just gave me a broader view of their world. But again, we know very little about what goes on with them. Yep.
If we are done with questions, we have an announcement of another